I think if you can't beat them, you've got to join them. And when I was really quite small, my parents used to go to the Blackwater 2 or 3 times a year. And of course I got dragged along too, so we started with the bent pin and the minnows and that sort of thing. And then I would go down to the river. My parents would be fishing for salmon and I'd be twiddling around trying to catch minnows and things like that. And then minnows led to trout, of course. And then eventually, I suppose, I got onto salmon, but not really till I got to the Bandon River then. But the Blackwater was where I learnt, and I had teaching from my mother and father, and I loved it. It was absolutely great. So that was the start, the Blackwater. Then what happened next, I suppose, I fished throughout my teens and later on the Bandon because we moved out and lived at a place called Inishannon. And there I used to fish for trout and salmon and caught the occasional salmon. And then the next thing that happened was I went to work in Dorset. And on the way back from Dorset, going down to the boat, I stopped off with a friend who married a guy in the army. And he was stationed in Crickhull, and I came to stay with her. And they brought me up here for a drink, and I thought, well, this is a very nice place. And I said, I wonder if there'd be any chance I'm here for a few days of any fishing when I saw the river. And somebody said, well, there's the man to ask. And that was my future father-in-law, Sam Brabner. And so I said to him, any chance of having a go at fishing while I'm here? And he looked me up and down, and he smiled and he said, I'm very short of washers up. And he said, if you do a bit of washing up while you're here, I'll give you some fishing. And that's what happened. But I might tell you that fishing on the Usk for wild brown trout is not an easy option. I think they were probably a lot easier on the Blackwater, and possibly in the days when not so many people were fishing either. But one thing led to another, and the son of the household was at home, and he said to his father, who's that bird with the fishing rod? And his father said, oh, that's some Irish bird. He said, she's going down fishing. So we got chatting and everything was fine, and ultimately at the end of the day, I married him. So I tell everybody I was on my way to the boat when this is what happened. I was going back to Ireland. But I'm a very lucky person because it's a beautiful place to live. And all you have to do is look at the river. It's just fantastic. And I can paddle down of an evening for an hour or something if I feel like it. So I've ended up the way I started, really, with the fishing rod in my hand. So in '72, we had a phone call from my father-in-law to say, I can't go on any longer. Am I going to sell it, or are you going to take it over? Now, this was a very difficult decision because my husband at that stage was working in Sheffield and had a good job in steel. So we said, we'll think about it. So we slept on it for, I have to say, one night, and in the morning we rang up and said, we'll do it. So we came and we moved from Bakewell in Derbyshire down to Crickhull, 3 loads of horse box with all our stuff in it, 2 small children, a dog with quite a few puppies in tow, and we arrived. And it was a very interesting situation because we had no idea what we were taking on, apart from the fact that Nick, of course, had been brought up here. But I had no idea. I was a games teacher, and I had no idea at all. I was quite good on timetables, and that did help, and dealing with people. I liked that. So that was all okay. And to begin with, it wasn't very busy, it has to be said. It was quiet. After the war, of course, things were very difficult, and it was just beginning to get better at that stage. But it was not the easiest thing ever, and as regards enjoying life, it was quite fantastic. In the morning, very often at breakfast, my father-in-law would say to me, and what are we going to do today? And I'd say, well, I've got to do some work. And he'd say, don't be ridiculous. All I actually had to do was take the children to school and then flowers in the hotel and things. But he'd say, come on, we'll play golf today. Or another day, mother-in-law would say, let's go for a ride. Or we'd go fishing, or we'd do something. Pressure is such that those days have gone. But it was a very enjoyable start, I have to say. And that was how we landed here, and we just had to take over and find our way, and we did. And really, I suppose it's an extension of our home, this, and that seems to be the bull point for people who are coming to stay. They love the fact that it's a home, and they get the homely feeling with the family there. And lots of them say, it's like coming home. So that's got to be a very good thing. And we get a lot of return people. And they're lovely. They become friends. And I think that's terrible for them because they invite us to stay with them for free and they pay to stay with us. Can't be bad. Looking through this, it's interesting. R.M. King features in the 50s quite often. He was a lovely man, Admiral King, and he came every year with his wife at the beginning of the season, and he fished pretty well every morning. And when he caught one trout, he brought it back, and he would never catch any more. He brought it back and would have it for his breakfast. And every day, my mother-in-law had to make rice pudding for his pudding at lunchtime. He was a lovely man, Admiral King. He came for years and years. Oh, Johnson, yes, I remember him. He was my husband's boss. And the first time my husband ever took me out for dinner, which was up in the Midlands where I was teaching tennis at the time, Mr. Johnson lent him a £5 to pay for the dinner. That tells you what it cost in those days. Bit of a difference now. The Three Musketeers, they were wonderful. 2 generals and an RAF chap, and the Three Musketeers came every year from further down in South Wales somewhere, and they were lovely, lovely people, and they fished every day as well. And then I see one here, S.G. Brabner, my father-in-law, very cold east wind, that was in 56. 3 fish, the best one was 1 pound 8 ounces of a trout. They're all here, and a lot of the names are very familiar. As regards to fishing, salmon is disappointing. There's no getting away from it. In general, anybody that knows anything about fishing knows that we are lacking salmon big time. It started with netting, I suppose. The nets have now been taken off at the mouth of the estuary here. There's been a huge amount of trawling for fish. I gather that the netting outside Ireland was monumental. 2 miles of net. So that obviously had a huge effect, but it's not just that. And I think it's more the temperature of the water has altered over the years with our climate change. And I think that they don't like that very much. Nobody actually really knows what it is, but we are not getting them. Now, last year we had 2 fish, I think it was. In my time here, we've been to 40 or so. It is a spate river. You've got to have the water to get the fish. It's become later too. There used to be spring fish. We don't have spring fish really very much now. It's usually a late run of peel, and you're lucky if you hit that. But having said that, of course, there have been some amazing things happen. We hadn't been here very long before a guy came in and said he'd never fished before. He'd like to fish for salmon. So we set him up, and he went down the river, and he had 4 fish on his first day ever fishing for salmon. He just thought it was a piece of cake. He couldn't understand what all the fuss was about. We've had a few interesting stories, actually. It reminds me too of a lad that I used to teach tennis to, because in my spare time I taught tennis. And this lad was very keen on fishing. So I said, well, if you'd like to come at the weekend and bring a friend, come. So he came, first cast down on the salmon pool into a fish. Well, they had nothing. They didn't have a net. They didn't have anything. Anyway, they caught the fish between them and dragged it up on the bank. And of course the fish slipped out of their hands and went back into the water. What a sad story. And that was his first fish ever. But there have been some interesting stories of people catching a lot of fish, but we're going back to probably the 50s. And recently we've just had less and less. But that's the salmon. Now, the trout, always, always good, providing you know what you're doing, or you come and have some instructions, or you have a helper, because they're all natural wild brown trout. It's not stocked at all. And they are not easy. If they see you, you've had it. But it's an easy river to fish in that parts of it are very broken water, and then they can't see you in the broken water, and you need a short line and a dry fly. It's the most delightful way to catch a fish, really, because you stalk your fish and away you go, bang. Very satisfactory. But they're beautiful trout, very pink and very good to eat. Come on, good boy. Come on, come on, come on. Come on.